All right, what's up, everybody? So I have a good friend of mine, a team leader. He's been in real estate for 18 years.
Yeah.
18 years. Michael Fox, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Davis. Good to be here.
Oh, it's good to have you. So I sent you like a bunch of stuff right before. And for everybody watching, Passion Seekers, what we really want to do is create something where and show people that your passion is a dream and it actually can happen and create that freedom. And Michael's a perfect example. You've been doing it for 18 years. And I think, weren't you going to be like a chiropractor, or wasn't your dad a chiropractor?
So it's funny because my dad was a chiropractor, but not only that, his parents were both chiropractors. His grandfather was a chiropractor, and then all of his siblings are chiropractors except one. So it seemed like, the path had been chosen, but he actually kind of helped me decide to go a different direction.
Super. So what made you decide the different direction?
Well, it helped that I had a really serious relationship when I was in high school.
Okay.
And so we were getting pretty serious, graduating high school and thinking about getting married. And so going to, school to be a chiropractor for another 7-8 years just to get started seemed like a long time. And meanwhile, my parents had gotten into real estate while I was in high school, and they were like, hey, you can get this. And I basically got a real estate license and got started right away. And so when I would have been graduating from chiropractic school, I was a realtor for 8 years.
Super cool. Yeah. So if you don't know my story, kind of going into the real estate aspect, I think it's crazy because like most of everyone that grow up, like go to college, it's the whole trend. Like you go to school, you go to high school, you graduate, you go to college, and you get a 9-to-5, and they say that's the way to go. Show up, work, and then collect a paycheck. And real estate's not that.
No. For better or for worse.
Yeah, like it's great because like payday is fantastic.
Yeah.
But then the 4 months where you're like, am I going to get a payday? You're like,
right.
Oh crap. You're sitting there contemplating literally everything. But like you jumped off the deep end and said, you know what, I'm not going to go into 8 years back into school and anything like that, and you just fully committed. So really in sales, the rule of thumb is like 6 months to a year, depending on what you're selling, is the first roughly when you can get your first check or anything like that.
Yeah.
So how was the first, let's say first 3 years?
Well, you're sending me way back. It's funny because we got married with, these dreams and aspirations and thinking like, well, we don't really need that much money, so we weren't really, we were doing like the back of the napkin math and going, well, rent is this much, food is this much. And there's probably a bunch of things we left off and went, wow, I mean, we hardly need anything to survive, right?
Yeah.
So my wife had a job and I had a job outside of real estate because I literally just got my license. And we actually got pregnant pretty quick after we got married, and my wife was so sick she had to stay home.
Oh, wow.
So that was kind of unexpected, and it was, it was a little bit tough. I did have some real estate sales. I was working extra jobs. I remember selling like a really high-end house and then asking the lady next door if I could rake her leaves for a little extra money. So, so I've been there, and I remember my wife talking to me about going and maybe just getting a job at somewhere stable. At the time, I think it was Boeing coming here and doing a lot of hiring.
Yeah.
And it was tempting at one point because, the ups and downs of your own business. But I just remember thinking about feeling trapped in that environment and just deciding, no, if I have to work extra jobs, if I have to do whatever, I'm not going to get trapped into just working for somebody else. They could fire me at any time. They could tell me when I have to work, when I, can and can't, how much I can make, all of those things. And ultimately, I stuck it out, and I'm glad I did.
Yeah, that's crazy. I think you used the word trap, and I love that word because it's very similar. Like I said, I was in corporate. I guess corporate. I was in roofing. So I say corporate, but I worked for a national roofing company. Was the last company that I worked for, and I had the same feeling. I always had that thought in my head that like there has to be more than life than just this. It has
Mhm.
to be more than life than just showing up on Monday, working till 5 o'clock, and then getting excited for Friday to end because you have the weekend. And I was like, literally, my boss dictates everything of mine, like my happiness and my time, my money, what my lifestyle at that point. I was like, I could be the best worker in this entire company and they can still fire me, which inevitably did happen. I was growing the business and everything was going great. And then I get a call Wednesday night at like 8 o'clock. And then my boss says, we don't need you anymore. I was like,
Mm.
well, joy. And I think, one, I was always planning going into real estate, but I was like, I didn't fully jump because I was scared. And so that's kind of, when you say that, leads me into my next point and question is, so obviously, like when your wife got pregnant, she got sick, and your business, anytime, whether you're an entrepreneur or in any business, real estate, that's ups and downs.
Mhm.
And like I haven't been in it very long. I'm coming up on a year at this point, and just within a year, I've seen a ton of ups and downs. How how did you keep yourself from quitting? And because your wife is like your biggest, like my wife, like I lean on her for the affirmation. I lean on
Right.
her for like when life's hard, I'm like, I like go to her and I'm like, am I doing the right thing? And there's been times where she's like, no, go get a 9 to 5. And I'm like, what? So how
Yeah.
did you keep yourself from quitting?
I didn't follow in my parents' footsteps as far as chiropractic, but I did, I think, follow my dad's footsteps as far as being an entrepreneur.
Okay.
And so thankfully I was raised on that, idea of work for yourself, don't work for somebody else, build a business, own a business. And so that was really ingrained in me. I mean, my dad had me reading, Rich Dad Poor Dad when I was a kid. He had me listening to motivational tapes and business speakers, and they were into some different, even some of the multi-level marketing type things, but they had some great speakers that, I got to hear from. And so all of that was kind of built into me. So I think when the idea of just getting a 9 to 5 job came up, it was just I just had like a gag reflex almost, just like
That's a good way of putting it.
it's just like, oh no, I can't do that.
Yeah.
I'd rather do just about. And I mean, that may be right for some people. It is right for some
Yeah.
people, I'm sure, but it just wasn't right for me, and I knew that. And so as far as sticking it out, it was kind of like, if I'm not going to do that, then I just got to do what I've got to do to make this work.
Yeah. And that's one
Mhm.
thing I think mankind, humans, everyone, it's really cool, one, how God created us, because like I'm an entrepreneur at heart. Like
Mhm.
I've always thought like an entrepreneur. I've always wanted to own my own business. I like the risk. I like the uncertainty. Like I mean, I've told you times where like it terrifies me that I don't know what's next, but also I have such an adrenaline rush from it.
Mhm.
Whereas you know, I have some of my close friends. They love the 9 to 5. Like they love the security, but like one can't survive without the other. Like if you don't have your 9 to 5 worker, then an entrepreneur doesn't have employees.
Yeah.
then it's just a solopreneur at that point.
Mhm.
And so, which I think is crazy because like it's the two can't exist without each other. And I think, and that's kind of where I lead passion seekers and what this podcast is because like, yes, it's going to be catered more towards entrepreneurs because that's my comfort zone. That's what I like to talk about. I love to talk about business. But on the flip side of that is like people can find their passions in a 9 to 5 and excel up the corporate ladder. Like, I mean, one of the things I love about real estate and the leads that we get that come through, like I was talking to a lead that came through, they were looking at a house and I called her and she was like, "Oh yeah, I was going to move to South Carolina, but like now I'm moving to Paris." I was like, "Well, that's a change." And she was the VP of sales for 3M, and they were
Wow.
flying her out there to train all those. And like she works a 9 to 5. When you're up that high, it's really not a 9 to 5 anymore. It's just whenever. But like she's in that structure and she's excelling in it because. And I asked her, I was like, you know, do you find this passionate? And she was like, yeah, I love being able to help people and train them and also enjoy the insecurity of that aspect.
Mhm.
So I think that's really cool. And Rich Dad Poor Dad's it's a good book. I haven't had the chance to really dive in and read that one yet. What was your take on it?
Yeah, it's definitely worth the read, and it's been a while, but he learns a lot of lessons from these two different sources, and he kind of compares, kind of like you were saying with, hey, just go to school, get a good job, work
Yeah.
9 to 5 versus the other route of maybe you go to school, maybe you don't, you work for yourself. He would say if you were going to be an employee, work to learn before
Mm.
you work to earn. So there's nothing wrong with being an employee and just kind of being in the best environment and learning from them and learning skills that you can take to grow yourself later.
Yeah.
But the other thing I guess I took away from it is the idea of not to think not to think can I afford something, but how can I afford it?
Mm.
And that really will get your mind turning whenever you start to think big and you're like, well, how could I do that?
Mm.
What would I need to do? Whatever business you're in, well, how many would I have to sell, or how many podcasts would I have to do
Yeah.
to get this much money to be able to do this thing? And it's pretty cool. It's just a totally different way of thinking.
Yeah.
So, yeah, you should read that. Like,
Yeah, that's
tomorrow.
yeah, I honestly might. Screw the book that I'm reading now. We're just going to stop in the middle. But that's super cool. So like with that way of thinking, it's probably opened up a lot of different doors.
Yeah, for sure. For sure.
So like one of the things, and we chatted about it for a little while, is investing.
Mhm.
Is that the same way that you approach investing? Like when you
Yeah.
wanted your first investment property, you were like, all right, I need to sell X amount of houses to get that next investment.
Actually, with that, it was a little different. How can I afford it can be also creativity.
Mm-hmm.
You see a good deal and it's a great deal on a house, but you don't have the money. Well, how are you going to do it? And there's all kind of ways you can do it. You can partner, you can do, purchase subject to their mortgage. You can get creative instead of just saving the money, but saving the money is certainly one way to do it. Sell more houses is one way to do it. And, you mentioned about your wife being like the one that supports you. And that's true for me too. My wife's always supported me, but there's been times when she's more like she's more looking to me for that reassurance that everything's going to be okay. And I do think sometimes as the leader, you have to be willing to say, well, I understand you're concerned, but this is what we're going to do to make it happen too.
Yeah. I've definitely experienced. It's so weird because you transition, like when you go from, a full-time job, 9 to 5, making good money, to saying, all right, let's just risk it all. Let's go for it. One, there's no room for failure. There's like room for like failure, but this was my plan A. I didn't have a plan B. I was like, if I have a plan B, then I'm going to fall back on it and go with that route. But my wife would support me. She supported me all the way through it. In the sense of like, she quit her job and got, an actual 9 to 5 and worked that and all that stuff to kind of compensate the difference, which I'm so thankful for. But there was times when it was like, okay, like you're 3 months in and like, we don't have a paycheck yet. And I'm like, no. She was like, are we expecting one? I was like, I don't know. And like, and then the pressure became, and it was like, then I had to sit there and say, in faith and in confidence, and say, no, if I stick with this and follow through with this, it's going to be so much greater than if I quit now.
Yeah.
And it was hard because when someone pushes back on your dream, all you want to do is push back and get defensive and all that stuff. And I think I had to transition and be like, no, I have to guide her and help her see what I'm seeing, because she doesn't understand real estate like I do. And she doesn't see what I'm working on either.
And it's, it's you're starting to see some of the fruit of your labor, starting to pay off.
Yes.
And, I remember, my wife came from a very different background. She wasn't reading Rich Dad, Poor Dad. She wasn't doing any of this, changing your thought life, any of that stuff. But she was doing great on her own, But when we got married, she wasn't used to dreaming as big. So over the years, it's been kind of good to see her like transition. Like it was almost like initially we get married, we live in this little cheap apartment, and she was just satisfied in a big, like she was content, I should say, with that, and maybe thinking a little. But we would drive by really nice houses, and she'd say, "Man, are you actually thinking we would ever live in a neighborhood like this?" And I'm just like, well, yeah, I am. Because that's how I always thought, like, you're just going to get here and how are we going to get there, you know?
Yeah.
But then now she's starting to pull me a little bit sometimes because over all these years, she's seen me grow and she's seen me, you know, take our family a little bit higher. And then she's getting used to that. And now it's almost scary to her if I'm not thinking big. And she's like, wait, are you starting to get satisfied? When are we going to
How the tables
do
turn.
Yeah, exactly. Now she's ready for me to get a bigger dream and a bigger goal and go for it, you know? So
That's so, which I love that you brought that up. So, and going back, like I'm talking a lot about what passion seekers, because this is episode 1, and like y'all may not know a lot of what passion seekers is, but basically it's making your dreams a reality. And because I used to be in the same boat, I was like, used to drive on Sullivan's Island and look at the beach houses and say, oh man, that would be so cool to be there one day. But like I was saying it as if it was never going to happen. It was never possible. Being in the shoes that I am now, I'm like, it's so possible. It's really a lot easier than people make it out to believe.
yeah.
Now I say that with a grain of salt. There's a lot of hard work that goes into it, but it's really more the mental game. It's believing that you can, believing that you will, and being able, like, this podcast. Like I would tell you right now, I procrastinated this for 3 months now because of fear of like, fear of failure, or it won't succeed, or it's not worth my time. But it's like persevering through that because you know the end game, which I think is really cool, you know. So that, how important do you think it is, you know, people call it a vision board or dream list or whatever, how important it is, do you think, to constantly reference those things or have those things?
I think it's really helped me over the years to have goals written down that I can look at, that I can read. It's almost like accountability in a way. So there's all kind of different ways, and they all can work. I think some of it has to do with your personality, the way you're driven, just like we have different ways we learn, different ways that we communicate. But for me, writing down goals, what I want for my family, what I want for, you know, my finances, what I want to do in the next year, 5 years, 10 years, and then looking at it has really helped me over the years.
Yeah, that's cool. Because I mean, I like the also cool part is the thinking of it from a financing aspect. And like, I read a book called 10x is easier than 2x, meaning like growing your business to 100 million is a lot easier than trying to hit your first 100,000. Because once you learn the 100,000, it's just rinse and repeat and then scale. And in the book, it stated like, want what you want because you want it, not because, you know, you think it's like, just feel free to want. Like, so if you want to be rich, like, don't feel guilty because you want that. Now, as long as you want it for the right reasons, and you know, right reasons can be subjective, but like your morals are aligned and all that stuff. And because ultimately, like, I wanted an extravagant life. And I used to talk down to myself because I was like, oh no, you can't have that. Like, you can't, that's boastful, or, you know, whatever you want to kind of put it into. But now I just lost where I was going with that. But
the 10x is easier than 2x.
Yeah. So like, I mean, and I think it's really cool with you being at the scale where you're at now. Cause I mean, wouldn't you say real estate's been pretty successful for you?
Yeah, it's been really good and given me a lot of opportunities and things.
Yeah. Not only to say that, I mean, you have 8 kids as well.
Right.
8.
Yeah.
So you have a lot of mouths to feed. And how many Airbnb properties do you have right at the moment?
So I own, I believe, 6, and then I have a partner that we manage maybe 6 more together. So
I mean, you have 8 kids, 6 Airbnb properties, and like a lifestyle that you want to live. So like, obviously you have to have that vision and want that, and to be able to fulfill that and believe that it's possible.
Right.
So if you're looking at investment property, here's your dude to go to. So
this together.
Yeah. So I mean, one, real estate's a pretty demanding business.
Yeah.
For the most part, if you want to scale it to the point that you are at, you know, you have to being an entrepreneur is working 24/7. Learning the boundaries is I think what I'm learning and think is the hardest part. How do you set boundaries with scaling to your extent and also having 8 kids and having a wife to manage. Like that's a lot to juggle. I have a wife and a dog.
Yeah.
I'm struggling with it now.
Well, a couple of things. One is priorities. You have to have your priorities in order, and you have to put things in place that protect those priorities. So like a week ago, my 8-year-old kept saying, "Dad, I want to play with you. I want to do this. Can we build something?" He's asked my wife lately if we can have more dinners around the table. So we're trying to do that.
So cool.
But I put time in my calendar on Saturday and said, this time is play with Pax for 2 hours, ended up being more than that. But, I put that time in there, and the next time he asked me, can I play with him? I didn't just say, I can't right now. Cause a lot of times I catch, oh yeah, but not right now. I showed him, I said, hey, look what this is on my calendar. And he's like, play with Pax, and his face just lit up. And so I was like, yep, not tomorrow, but the next day we're going to do stuff together. And he had wanted to build something. So we ordered this wooden sandbox and we put all that together, which is like a big Lego set, so he enjoyed that. He got to put the screws in it and work on it. And it's like, it's not going to be perfect because an 8-year-old helped put it together, but that wasn't the point. The point was doing it. And then we went hiking and looking for shark's teeth, And this week coming up, we're going out of town for a basketball tournament. I put that in my calendar, like as soon as we had that date. So if somebody would have asked me to go see a house Saturday morning, I would have told them I have an appointment. And then I could reschedule or see if somebody else on the team is available. But the other thing is, and I thought about this when you said Sullivan's Island, you're driving around looking at all these houses on Sullivan's Island thinking, well, how could I get there? And whenever I come across something and I think, how could I get there? The thing to look at is, how did other people do it? And I think I heard that from Brian Tracy. He's like, just get in the back of the line and follow people to the front of the line.
Yeah.
So when it comes to real estate systems, I've interviewed top agents, how they're doing things. And if they're willing to share with me, I'm willing to take that stuff. I've paid for courses. I've paid for coaching. With the Airbnbs, I didn't want to be trying to figure it out for so long. So I found somebody that had a really successful Airbnb business. They manage like 40 Airbnbs and they only take a couple of hours a day to do it. I think an hour a day is what they said for 40 Airbnbs. And I bought their system. It was kind of expensive, but I just bought it. I have all the templates, the business plan and everything, and implemented it. And it did great right off the bat. So I think that's one big takeaway is find out what works from somebody else and just take it if you can and improve it. And then putting your priorities in place, kids, wife, God, and then your business. And that's really what keeps you on track.
Yeah. I think that's I always hear like don't reinvent the wheel. And I was like, it was always like a joke and you kind of laughed it off and you're like, yeah, I won't do that. And never really understood it until like being in the more entrepreneurial aspect and really diving into the mindset of what it takes to be an entrepreneur. And like now it's like, okay, my mind's so creative and all this stuff, but like I want to be here. Here's my position X. I'm here. Let me create a new path. And I've learned more often than not, every time I try to create a new path, I get back at the starting point. I'm like, I got absolutely nowhere. So, I mean, in your experience, you've been in real estate for 18 years. And I would definitely say without a shadow of a doubt that real estate is 100% entrepreneur based. Like it's your business. That's why, success rate of a real estate agent, I think studies just came out. It's like 1% only make it their first year. And so with your background and you've seen so many people come in and out, what do you think is the biggest thing or biggest reason why most entrepreneurs, real estate agents, business owners fail?
It's just harder than they think. It's there's not a guaranteed paycheck, as you know. There's not somebody making you do. As bad as it is to have to go to work and report to a boss, at least they make you get things done. But when you work for yourself, it's easy to go into the office and just not really do anything, you know, and
Mhm.
just chit chat. And especially if you don't have a team, if you don't have a plan, you just kind of kill time. And that doesn't work. I mean, it
Yeah.
is on you to make things happen. And then I think it's just grit, you know. Agents that stick it out, they all have to go through some times of uncertainty, some times of questioning, some times of challenges. And if you don't have a little bit of grit and determination, then you're not going to make it.
Yeah.
You know, when you have that, hey, this is, I've decided to do this. And if I have to, I'll do, you know, I'll do extra, I'll do what it takes. I'll get up earlier, I'll stay later, I'll, you know,
Mhm.
whatever it is. If you decided you're going to make it work, then that's usually who's going to succeed.
Yeah. That is why I did not create a plan B, because I knew if I was like, I like to think that I have grit, and I hope, I can back that up. But like, if I had a plan B, it would be so easy for me just to say, you know what? I got a job waiting on me on the other side. So much easier. But kind of, you know, what I've seen just within a year, the freedom that I have as far as like, I'm not to the point where I'm freedom in finances. I'm not definitely not where I want to be. I'm on the path to get where I want to be. But the freedom of just being able to do what I want to do. The cost though is you have to be willing to do the work ahead of time. So like me and my wife are able to go on multiple vacations a year and I don't have to ask anyone.
Mm-hmm.
I look at my schedule. I'm like, yeah, I don't have any closings. I don't have anything. But I think, you know, a lot of people, and this is where the entrepreneur world was hard for me, is because there's no one waking up telling you're not waking up and your boss is shooting you a text and saying, hey, you need this, 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 and this done. You're like, you wake up, you're like, okay, I'm going on vacation in a week. What do I need to be doing this week so that way I can be free? And half the time I end up, doing some type of work on vacation.
Yeah.
But it's not painful. And that's what I like about it.
The other challenge, I think, and this could be for any business, not just real estate, but if you don't have clear cut vision of what needs to be done, then you can get sidetracked by so many other things. I mean, you've had probably a ton of people try to sell you products that are going to fix your business or help you get business or whatever. And some of them might be decent, but you really have to have certain things that, I'm going to do this and this is my plan. I'm going to work it no matter what and stick with it. And a lot of people that fail, it seems like they try one thing before it takes off. They stop and try something else before that has a chance to take off. It's kind of like a farmer, if you like planted a seed and then like after 5 days, you're like, well, I don't see anything from that. I'm going to dig that up and plant something else. And if you don't let it ever grow, you're not going to have anything.
Yeah. So you'd say in any business, consistency is key.
Yeah.
And I would definitely piggyback off that. Like, not to talk about myself or anything like that, but I promised myself like consistency. Do not quit. Do not quit. Do not quit. So every morning I would show up here and I would just, when I first started real estate, I had no earthly idea what I was doing. Like I showed up and I was like, all right, I opened up the CRM and I just kind of stared at it for a little bit. And then I kept doing it. And I was like, oh, okay, I can do this. I can do this. And like, I would say it's not, like I said, it's not paying off to the extent, but like, first year.
You were consistent, not a whole lot of results. Consistent, not a whole lot of results. Consistent, and then boom, 4 transactions, 3,
yeah.
All these contracts come through and somebody on the outside might be like, wow, you got really lucky this week. No.
Yeah. It's like, no, I was contemplating quitting multiple times.
You were selling to people you've been talking to for months and following up with for months. And that's how it works.
And I think that's the most rewarding thing. And like, I say this more from a success perspective and encouragement. Like, I think it was the most rewarding thing. Like, was it similar for you? Like when you started?
Yeah. Like I said, it's been a long time, but I do feel like, yeah, it was a lot of peaks and valleys at first, and then everything starts coming together a little bit better and you don't have as much space in between, so, but yeah, you have to be consistent.
It's kind of throws me back thinking about like ups and downs, valleys, and all that. Were you a realtor during 2008, like
Yeah.
the market crash?
Yeah. I got my license in '06.
Oy.
So yeah, that's basically got my license in '06, got married in '06 after a few months of being a realtor. And then, it was a wild ride for a little bit. It
Yeah.
was definitely a challenge there. And it's like I need a shirt that says like I survived the 2008 real estate market or something.
Really need something like that.
Yeah.
Because I mean, 2008 was when it actually crashed, right?
Yeah, there was a lot of foreclosures, a lot of short sales, but there were still houses selling.
Yeah.
I mean, and that's the thing you have to remember is they were selling, they were just foreclosure houses selling,
Mhm.
and actually the people that were working that side of the business made a killing,
Yeah.
people that did a few foreclosures here and there, all of a sudden they were the top realtor in the area,
Mhm.
and it made me think going forward that I wanted to be more diverse and being able to work all kinds of transactions, have different streams of income and things like that. But there's money to be made in every market.
Yeah. I think that's what I'm learning lately is like, I don't know, life's what you make it. And some people may agree with me, some people may disagree, but really, like, every bad situation has a good side, every good situation has a bad side.
Mhm.
It just really determines what you look at. Because I think the past couple deals that I've had, I'm like, just so excited that we got to the closing table because I didn't think
Yeah.
we were. And like one of them we didn't, but like obviously I was bummed. But at the same time, like, I'm like, but the amount of stuff I learned in that transaction,
Right.
I don't think I'm,
And that'll be helping you somebody else.
yeah,
Somebody else will be going through that and you'll be able to help them.
yeah,
And you'll start to be able to head things off at the pass. And in that situation, there's really nothing that could be done to fix it, but you still got to learn all those different things.
yeah. And I think it was really cool. And I think that was a point when I like kind of clicked. I was like, to be an entrepreneur, you really have to just one, go with the flow. Like genuinely go with the flow. Like whatever way the transaction is going, whatever way your deal or your business is going, you just ride it out. And you obviously, if there's something that you can actively do it. But like if you can't control it, then you just brush it off, take what you can learn, and move forward.
Yeah.
Which I learned that in that situation, and I think that one was tough. That one hurt because I was like, oh God, like because I think that was during the time where I was like, oh my gosh, I don't know if I can make it any longer. And then I got that one. I was like, oh, we're good. And then it was just chaos throughout the entire
So
process.
see, it was still a blessing that you got it just for that hope
It
to keep you in it a little longer.
It kept me long
And
enough.
then you got some more under contract before that one.
It kept me in long enough. And I think that's what I've learned is like anytime when life throws like adversity your way or the point where, and I've noticed it in my life, and I told you this when I was actually thinking about quitting and I'm having that hard internal struggle was like anytime it's like, oh my God, I need to quit. You hit your peak.
Mhm.
If you would just take that one next step, the odds of you succeeding on that next step are very high. Have you seen that same, not the identical, but something along those lines of adversity?
Yeah, I would say, there's going to be times when you're tempted to quit. And then if you don't, it's going to pay off.
Mm-hmm.
And, for me, it always goes back to my faith, faith in God and being able to say, okay, well, God's going to provide for me, you know, and also thinking back about all the times in the past when we were going through that, again, my wife was planning to just keep working and we had this little plan where we could barely make everything work if we had our pennies just right.
Yeah.
And then now she can't work at all because she was just so sick with her pregnancy.
Mm-hmm.
But God provided for us, and I happened to sell more houses and we made it. And then like, as we've got 8 kids now, and I always joke every time we had more kids, we made more money, there's always like,
and tax write-offs.
Tax write-off, yeah. But you have a baby, it's expensive. You got to, buy all this new equipment and gear and baby stuff and diapers and everything else. And God's always provided. And there's been times when I'm like, man, I don't know how we're going to get through this. And sure enough, he's always provided for us. Mm-hmm. And so looking back on that, now I get in this scary situation And I think, well, I guess God, I want to see how you're going to provide for this need. You
Mhm.
know, if I'm right with Him, if I'm doing everything I can, then it's going to work out. You know.
Yeah. I definitely agree with you because I think that's when it changed for me. It was like, all right, when I was sitting there and I was like, oh my gosh, I don't know when my next deal is. I don't know when anything's going to happen. But I was like, all right, I need to just stop controlling and whatever happens, happens. And I'm just going to trust the process and like take it one day at a time. I think, I think that was super big. It's like, all right, we just need to take one day at a time and get through it and focus on the positives and like the negatives. It's good to evaluate them, but like, that was bad. What could I have done right? Okay.
Yeah.
And you move forward. I think the entrepreneur journey I think it's just a constant growth. Would you say, have you ever, I mean, do you think you'll ever hit a plateau? Do you ever think there will be a plateau with growth or anything like that? Or you just think it's like one of those things?
Oh, I'm sure. Yeah. No, I mean, I think you hit plateaus naturally, and then you have to decide what you're going to do from there. The problem is if you just try to coast, you're going to end up going backwards. Or, you're basically either going to be going forwards or backwards. But yeah, you're going to have times when you reach a point you're tempted to sort of take your foot off the gas,
Yeah.
you're tempted to slow down, you're tempted to just be content with everything the way it is. And yeah, I think that's probably always going to be a challenge for most people.
What's your motivation to get you through the plateau?
So the biggest thing that motivates me, and talking about passion seekers and my passion, I think one of the biggest things that makes me passionate is being able to just try to make the right decisions
Mm-hmm.
for my family, for myself, and not have to make decisions based on just money
Mm.
or based on other factors like, well, I don't feel like it or I can't do it. Like you get up at 4:30 in the morning and work out, or you're at the gym at 4:30.
Yeah.
So,
I'm a little crazy.
if you made that decision based on like, I'll just get up and go to the gym if I feel like it in the morning, you're probably not going to be at the gym
No.
much.
No.
But that's better for you to be there,
Yeah.
And for me, if like when it comes to our kids, if I want them to go to a certain school, I want that to be because that's the best school and not, well, that's the best school, but unfortunately we can't afford that. We have to do this other thing,
Yeah.
or, if it comes to medical care or a vacation or any of those things. Now, that doesn't mean I have to go with the most extravagant thing every time. That's probably not always the best
Yeah.
thing. But it just means that when we're making decisions, I want to be able to do what's best for my wife, what's best for our kids, what's best for our family, and just, provide for that,
Yeah.
And I look at it like God's provided for me. He's taking care of me. My job is to provide for my family, provide for my kids, and to keep being a better provider.
Yeah. Which I think is really along the lines of why I got into this and created this podcast. Cause I was like, a lot of people aren't going to necessarily get the freedom that they really want through working a 9 to 5 or working the job that they were told they should work or whatever. And I was like, okay, what do I want my life to look like we're asked that like as a kid, like what is your life going to look like in 10 years? As a kid, you're like, I don't know.
Right.
And like when I was in college, I had a teacher ask me, they were like, what do you want your life to look like in 10 years? I was like, house and a wife. And I was like, yeah, I don't know.
Hey, look what happened.
I got a house and a wife. Then when I lost my job, I was like, I did not see this coming. I asked myself, what do I want my life to look like in 10 years? And it was exactly that. I was like, I want to be able to provide for my family. I want to be able to provide a legacy rather than like just stable job. I want to be able to travel the world and offer that to my wife as well, where she can see the entire world and not have to sit there and be like, well, I only have 2 weeks of PTO and like I only get paid this much and we have this coming out and all that. No, I just want to be like, yeah, let's do it. And so far real estate's done that. Cause she was working in California. She was like, you want to go to California? I was like, my first initial answer was no. I was like, I gotta work. And then she was like, come on. I was like, okay.
That was so cool. You got to meet some clients while you were out there too.
Yeah,
That was
yeah.
like,
That was,
that
I
was
was
really
like,
funny.
so I'm not a tax professional, but I do know if you go meet clients in California, you can write the trip off as a business expense. So, and my wife's cousin is a CPA for Travis Scott, so I'm dropping that one out there. And I asked her, I was like, "Can I write this off?" She's like, "Absolutely." I was like,
I mean,
"Okay."
you legitimately went and met with multiple clients that are moving to South Carolina.
Yeah. Now, I mean, which is cool. That was kind of cool because like when I called them initially, they explained like, "Oh yeah, I have a bunch of rental properties in downtown Los Angeles," and I was like, "Cool, never been." I don't know any correlation. And then I got to meet them and then walk around and all that stuff, and I was like, "Oh," and like it was really one. It was cool that I had a job that I could do that. I thought that was really neat because I've always like seen, people like Brandon Turner that travel all over the place and help people and talk to people and be able to meet their clients and all that. And, podcast hosts that travel all of Ryan Pineda, traveling all
Yeah.
over the road, interviewing. Now people come to him, but like he gets to do that and have that opportunity. I think that's one, so cool because it's just another excuse to see the world.
Yeah.
And like, I don't know. I think that's probably been real estate's definitely my passion, but it also feeds into my other passion, which is just being able to feel free. Like
Mhm.
it's really weird to describe. Like when I came up with the idea of passion seekers, I was like, try to explain it for the longest time. I was like, passion seekers, yes, it's a name because I need a name to call this. I'm not just going to call it podcast, but passion seekers is more like an emotion, like being free from finances, being free from a boss, being free and feeling like you're just doing something that you're called to do.
Being able to seek your passion.
Yeah.
Basically.
Yeah. And
Whatever.
having that freedom. Like my wife's biggest thing is like to travel. And she put a big ask on me. She was like, I want to travel to every continent before I'm 30.
Ooh, how old is she now? I know that's not nice to ask, but we got a deadline.
She's still young enough. She's 23.
Oh, you got like one continent a year.
Yeah. Yeah.
She's already been to one, right? So.
Yeah. So I was like, oh my gosh. I was like, never in a million years would I have ever thought that one, I would be able to afford to do that. Two, would I ever be able to do that? Like I just thought my life was going to be living in South Carolina, I have my job, and we go to Disney World or we go on the cruise or stuff like that. But no, like we're seriously talking about going back to Italy or something like that. And I'm like, and it mostly because of my job. Like I would not be able to do. I've already taken, if we were looking at PTO, I've already taken 3 weeks off.
Well, you have an unlimited income.
I have, yeah. And that's, which I'm glad you brought that up because that makes me think of something. So when you own your own business, there's no floor, which is terrifying, but there's no ceiling. Like there's a billion plus people in this world and you're one individual. So all you got to do is find a couple people to buy your product or use you as a realtor and consistently use you, and you're golden. But one, it's finding those people, terrifying. Two, how do you live? That's a bad way to frame it, but do you always live with the fear of being in business and having a business? Do you live in the fear of that there's no floor and like, that's constantly stressing you out? Or is it just something that you acknowledge the fear? Or yeah, I guess how do you manage with that?
No, I wouldn't say you live in fear. I mean, I don't really I don't believe we should be in fear. We shouldn't be living in fear because, again, going back to faith, I believe that God's going to provide for my needs.
Mm-hmm.
So if I catch myself feeling fearful, then I have to remind myself about that, and sometimes I do. I have to remind myself that, like, it's not all up to me. There's a lot of things outside my control. I just can do what I can control. Yeah. And then I have to trust God. And we're not supposed to live in fear, So the Bible says God has not given us the spirit of fear, but of power and of love and of a sound mind.
Mm-hmm.
So, it doesn't mean I don't get fearful or think about, well, what if? I mean, you could look at the next year and just think, well, what if that year isn't good? What if it's bad? And instead, we need to look at what we can control and then, what's our faith in? And that's what it comes down to.
So speaking to passion seekers and the audience listening, most of the people that I hope that are listening are either working a 9 to 5, thinking in like my avatar. My avatar is a person working a 9 to 5, telling themselves that I'm meant for more, or that there is something more in life than this. But they are in a spirit of fear. They have a family, they have a house, but they're like terrified. Like, I think when I was in the position I was in, I was like, I know real estate I will be so successful at real estate because I loved it. Like, I love helping people. I just thought if you're not in real estate, you may know this, may not, but like, I had a real estate mind. Like, if that makes any sense. So for that individual, what would you say to them? One, to be overcome by the fear, or to overcome the fear, and to make the leap of faith.
Well, I would say, first of all, it's okay to keep doing what you're doing and provide for your family that way for a little while. Like, it's okay to do that. I'm not saying that nobody should have a 9 to 5 job and they should quit tomorrow and just jump in the deep end and sink or swim.
Risk it all.
Some people that work for it. Yeah. And I've seen people do very well doing that. Okay. So don't get me wrong. And some of the best agents I know were like, hey, it's sink or swim. I'm in this. And usually that was because their other job just ended and they were like, now I'm going into this and it's sink or swim. But if you're not in that position and you're thinking about it and you're just afraid, I would start with looking at people that have been really successful and try to follow what they do. And I've seen people get into real estate and make like $100,000 their first year because they modeled what somebody else did. And they got so into that culture. I mean, they're watching all the training videos. They're watching YouTube about it. It's basically become their passion.
Yeah.
Or basically become their hobby. And they just learn so much about business or the entrepreneur lifestyle or real estate or whatever they're going into, that by the time they jump into it, they're performing like a top performer. And so that would be a really good strategy to just pick it up and make it your hobby. And then when you're ready to take that leap, you go for it, or you start to incorporate it a little bit at a time. I mean, depending on what it is, you can start by bringing in extra income from the thing that you want to be, passionate about.
Yeah.
You bring in that, and then you eventually replace what you've got. I mean, that's not a bad way to go either. And it depends on your state in life and everything else too.
Yeah. And I will say, like, that was my goal. I was like, all right, I'm going to be in roofing. That's going to fund my life. And I'm going to do real estate on the side. And like, when real estate starts kicking off, I'm going to quit. But, I think God knew, and everybody knew, that if I was to do that, I was going to commit to one thing, because I get obsessive. Like, if I say I'm going to do something, like, I get pretty obsessive over it. And like, so if have an obligation to a boss, like, I would never do that. So he was like, no, we're just going to cut you off. Like, ends now, real estate it is. So I was in the sink or swim. And I have lived my life with the verse, iron sharpens iron. My mom always told me, she was like, hang around the people who you want your life to look like.
Yeah.
And she said that when I was in high school, and I was probably not hanging out with the best of people. So it was more of like a lecture than it was like a motivational, like, inspiration. Go get them, kid.
See, Mom, he was listening.
I was listening. I obviously, with scripture, everything's true in it, but I think that's been most prevalent in my life. And with you saying that, just kind of reaffirms it. So like, how would you, if someone's in that shoes and wants to find someone they want to implement, how would you recommend that they go about and find them? Because it sounds like you've reached out to a bunch of different people.
Well, first of all, subscribe to Passion Seekers.
Do it. I'm going to have like a little sign right there.
Yeah. No, I think this is going to be good. But it's funny. After all these years, things have changed. Okay.
Yeah.
But I was looking through a book that somebody gave me, John Brewer. He gave me a book called The Power of Focus. And The Power of Focus was really good. It had things about writing your goals, being organized, and all this stuff. But one part of it was talking about finding the people that are successful at what you want to do and interviewing them. And it's funny because I looked at names I wrote down. This is like 20 years ago that I wrote down these names of people that I wanted to go meet, and they weren't big celebrities. They were like local, really successful, like the top producing agents at my office, the top producing agents in the area. And I had met with all of them, and I just, I'm brand new. Sometimes you worry, like, are they going to share their, their plans with me?
Yeah.
But, here I am, 18 years old, 19 years old, and they shared everything with me. I mean, they were great.
That's
They were
cool.
like, here's my interview questions. Here's how I talk to buyers. Here's how I do this. I would just go ask them, like, what kind of shoes do you buy? What kind of this do you buy? And all those people are still in business today. And so that's one thing, is you can literally go to local people. I mean, if somebody's like, if you want to be a house flipper, find
Mhm.
somebody that flips a lot of houses and go talk to them and see what they'll do. Take them to lunch, coffee. If if you're in a certain business, find who's successful. Maybe work for them, like we were talking about.
Yeah.
If you work for them, you're going to learn from them. So
Mhm.
that's an option, and do some things for them. And then, of course, today you can learn everything, it seems like, on YouTube.
YouTube University.
Yeah, I mean, you can pick whatever thing, and again, make it like your hobby. We all watch things. Like for me, jujitsu is a big hobby, so I'm watching how to do these moves and how to get in shape for a fight and how to do the. I'm watching all that stuff.
Yeah.
Well, do that with your business of choice, your entrepreneurship. Subscribe to people that are really, really good and share a lot of content, and just enjoy it.
Yeah.
Like I used to sit up, I'd be in bed at 11 o'clock at night watching interviews with top producing realtors,
That's cool.
and it was a huge help, and then you can pay for stuff too. I think it's worth it a lot of times to pay for courses too.
Yeah. I feel like a lot of people, like my wife, I think really she sparked this podcast and like the dream. Like this was always a dream. This was always like, something that I wanted to do. But the job that she had, she called me after her first interview and she was like, "Hey, do you know this dude named Tony Robbins?" I was like, yeah, I do." And she was like, "Well, I'm hired and I work for this company that plans his events." And I'm like, "Oh my gosh." So for the past year, I got the behind the scenes of courses and coaches and all that stuff. And like, there was always a small part of me that I was like, yeah, this is kind of a gimmick. Seeing it from behind the scenes, I'm like, holy crap, like this has a lot to play in it. And then being able to participate in some of those events, and it's what may change my thinking from a limiting belief to like a abundance. Like
Yeah.
there's a belief, and it's your mindset's either framed to a limited belief of saying like, oh, I want to be in that house in Sullivan's Island, but that's not meant for me. Like I'll never have
Mhm.
that. Like I didn't come from money or anything like that. Or you have the abundance, which is what you talked about, is saying, how do I get that? Like what things do I need to do to be in that position? And from what it sounds like, from what you're saying, is surround yourself by those people.
Yeah, and just get used to that. It's like anything, you get used to certain things. Like for instance, your wife wanting to travel to all the different continents. That sounds kind of out there. It sounds like a big thing. Unless you're around people that like jump on jets all the time and fly wherever they want. I mean, there's
Yeah.
people that do that. Like they might go to every continent in a year, and that's just normal for them.
Yeah.
So it's kind of like a thermostat. Your thermostat is set to a certain thing, and if you go outside of that, then you're going to naturally go back to whatever your thermostat's set to. Whether it's like income, you're just thinking, this much a year is normal, so you're going to make about that much. If you get around people that are a lot higher, then your thermostat will raise, and then your expectations will raise with it.
That's funny. I just heard a speaker I was listening to. I think it might have been James Clear who used that analogy.
It's been around.
Yeah, and
So,
I think it's funny because I was like
Yeah.
dabbling with that idea and it never really clicked until this moment. So that's really cool perspective. Now, so we kind of talked about overcoming the fear and things to put in place to get you there. One, asking, from personal experience, like what is, from what it looks like, and I could tell from, we work closely together, you're pursuing your passions. Like, and I would say that by it's affirmed in your life. Like,
Mhm.
if you're pursuing your passions, your life is just ultimately going to be abundant, I think. And I believe that. So what opportunities have arise from pursuing your passions? What freedom do you feel? Like, what's the emotion behind it?
Yeah. Well, it kind of goes back to being able to make the right choices for my family,
Mhm.
and I don't feel like I've arrived. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
I've got a lot of room to grow and a lot more that I need to accomplish to be where I want to get. But it just really comes down to being able to do things with our kids. Again, with 8 kids, I've wanted to give them a good life and
Mhm.
not kind of have them feel like they don't get to enjoy anything because
Yeah.
there's a bunch of them. So even just things like being able to take them to restaurants and take them on vacations and buy them new shoes when they need new shoes and new clothes and do stuff like that's a big part of it.
Mhm.
Being able to take my wife places when she wants to go, being able to buy her things when she wants them.
But I'll probably kind of want to end on this question, hopefully to debunk some of the myths. I don't know. What do you think personally are some of the biggest misconceptions of people pursuing their passion and creating that into a business? I mean, like, yeah, I guess misconceptions would probably be the right term.
I think it depends on the person, but it seems like depending on what they believe, they project that on other people a lot of times. And it's funny because it sounds so cliche to me. It's like I've been so away from that way of thinking,
Yeah.
but of course people are going to think people that are doing well are greedy, and they might be. There's greedy people, there's
Yeah,
not. I'm
good
definitely
approach.
of the belief that when you have more resources, it makes you more of who you are.
Yeah.
If you're greedy, if you're rude, if you're mean and you have a lot of money to go with it, then it's going to be real mean and real greedy and real rude.
Yeah.
But if you're kind and you have a passion for helping people and you have some things that are important to you and you get resources, then you're going to be able to do more of that. I guess, having means does open up a lot of opportunities both ways. So again, if you're going to use it for good, then it's going to open up a lot of opportunities for that. If you want to use it for bad, you're going to have a lot of opportunities that somebody that doesn't have the resources might not have.
Mm-hmm.
So that's why we've got to stay grounded.
Yeah. That's a good misconception. Because I think that's a majority of people like, oh, if you're rich, you're just a bad person.
I've always heard other people saying that, like, well, if they're rich, they must have stolen that from somebody else or ripped something off. Yeah.
And that kind of goes back. So Myron Golden, I've got to meet him at ClickFunnels.
Wow.
Which was like, I didn't realize who it was at the moment. Like I did, but I really didn't. And then like I got back here and I kind of like looked up his YouTube. I was like, holy crap, this dude's like, he knows his stuff. And he always said, he was like, people have that mentality like, oh, if you're rich, you took it from someone else. He was like, I think he calls it the pie mentality. Like if you have 8 pieces to a pie and a slice of pie is like wealth. So most people feel like they're only going to take a third of that pie so they can let someone else have it.
Yeah.
Which in reality, if you were to take that pie, that's that limiting belief. You're thinking that.
Yeah. If you have 2 pieces, then that's because you got one of mine or something.
Yeah. Yeah. And like, he was like, no, he was like, life is abundant. God created it for abundance. Like you can dive into that.
Well, like I love looking at a great example is when I flip a real estate property, and for some reason, this came up a few years ago where I had a specific property and I happened to be using all these different providers that I work with. And it just hit me how everyone was benefiting from this transaction.
Yeah.
I mean, I bought the property from somebody that was trying to sell it and they really needed it sold. They didn't owe a lot of money on it. It needed a lot of work that they didn't want to do. And they were happy with what I paid them for.
Yeah. So you didn't lowball them or anything?
No, I mean, I got a good deal on it so I could make money.
But they were content.
But they were happy with it. I probably paid more than a lot of other investors would. So they got their money. I got the house. Then I paid my contractor. So he made money on it. I paid people to do stuff on the garage. They made money. I paid landscapers. They made money. I paid the lawyers. They made money. And then I paid another real estate agent. They made money.
Mm-hmm.
And then their client got this really nice house for a good price. And everything in it was, redone and new and everything else. And they made money. And then at the end, I made money.
Yeah.
So it's really that abundance. It's like we took something that, like, that house was worth a whole lot less and needed all this work. And now everybody gets to prosper. Oh, and the lender, somebody loaned the money. They made money.
And the cool part is the side effect is that the neighbors made money as well, because you just raised their property value by bringing in, a nicer home.
It really helps everybody. Like this idea of just there's only so much to go around, so don't take more than your fair share. That isn't just a limiting belief for you. That limits everything. And when you start to really invest, you realize, man, this helps everyone. Another great book is The Richest Man in Babylon, and he goes into a little bit of that.
That is okay. So I have read that book. That's a really good book. I was so against it for a little while because I was like, oh, this is just a ancient book. I was going to be reading a history book, but it was actually pretty good. And that's coming from someone that hates to read. I say I hate to read. I'm actually learning to really enjoy it.
We Audible, right?
Yeah, Audible. That's a great testimony to life of being in abundance, because I don't know. I had the same mentality for a while of like, oh, life's limiting, but I had the wrong mentality there for a little bit, because I was like, life's limiting, and the rich are for the greedy. But I was like, I want to be rich, and I always wanted to frame it. I was like, I want to be rich, but I want to do it the right way, because I thought that if you're rich, you're just a bad person. There's qualities that you may have to have. Doesn't make you a bad person. And I think that's how I wanted to build my real estate business. How I wanted to build this is I want to give back to my community. I want to give back to the people. Like Passion Seekers, I have a huge vision for it, and I want to help people start businesses. I want people to come up with great ideas. I want people to say, I want to do X, Y, and Z. And I'm like, okay, well, I'll invest in that and help them with that, because I've seen the freedom just within 10 months, almost a year.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, I can't imagine what my life's going to look like if I've just seen it in 10 months. And I was like, the blue collar worker, I was on roofs. I don't think you can get more blue collar than that, being up on a roof in the summer. And I was miserable. And I was like, there has to be more. And then I experienced this, and I'm like, the difference in it. And that's what I wanted. And I've always told myself, I want to be rich so I can help people. Yes, I want the side effect of having that freedom, but I've always wanted that. And I think, and when I really understood the abundance mindset of life is just, there's opportunities everywhere you look. Most people just don't look for them, or they don't think they're worthy of them.
Right.
And then Myron Golden said the pie analogy, and life is a kitchen. So if you're going with the pie analogy, then you have all the resources, you have all the things that you need to make the pie. So there's two ways you can do it. You can make the pie and keep it for yourself and be stingy with it, or you can make the pie and share it with people. And I was like, all right, with that analogy, I want to make the pie and be able to share it with people and give people that opportunity of freedom. So I think that was really cool.
Yeah.
So I said I wanted to end on that question, but I was thinking I want to end on one more thing. I went 3 key things, or let's make it more specific, 3 key characteristics that people typically carry when they're successful.
So this is going to be off the top of my head. So, I might think of one later that I'm like, oh, I should have said that. That would have been way better.
We'll post it in the comments. We'll post
okay.
3 characteristics. Oh, wait, 3 revised characteristics.
Yeah, we might have to revise these. We'll see. I think you have to have faith.
Okay.
I think you have to have commitment, which could be drive, and then I almost want to say curiosity. You have to be willing to learn. Like I said, you want to find out what's working and dive into it and just consume all you can about learning it. So if you had faith, commitment, and curiosity, it'd be hard for you not to be successful.
I would agree with you. Yeah. I don't think that needs a revision. That's pretty good.
We'll see. It'll be 2 a.m. and we'll think of something.
Yeah. Check the comments later.
Maybe tell us what you think would be the 3 things,
Yeah. Yeah. What, from y'all's perspective, what are the 3 big characteristics, one that you think a successful person should have, or you think a successful person does have based on either your personal experience or someone that you talked with. Michael, it's been a pleasure. It's been a lot of fun. First episode 1, got the nerves out of my system. Feels good, but I'm excited. Passion Seekers, we have a lot in the pipeline. I've been working on this for probably about 3 months now, procrastinating for about 2. But 3 months really of really thinking about it. So I'm really excited, and I'm glad that you got to be the first guest.
Me too. I appreciate it.
Yeah.
And, I mean, for your first podcast, it's not like you've got an iPhone sitting here, trying to do it.
No, the setup.
Pretty good.
Shout out. I'll shout out my sister on this one. I'm using her camera.
Nice.
So
we're nice camera.
I know. She has the hobby of being a photographer. So if you need a camera, I doubt she'll let you use it, but you can hire her. But Michael, I appreciate it. I look forward to it. And then last thing, where can they find you on social media?
All right. So you can look me up. If you Google Michael Fox, believe it or not, Michael Fox, Realtor, Charleston, South Carolina, you'll find me all over the
So
place.
not Jamie Fox, Michael Fox.
No, Michael Fox, the one and only.
Perfect. Well, guys, I will catch y'all on the next one. Thank you for tuning in. Later.